মোর চিত্ত মাঝে উদয় দিগন্তে শঙ্খ বাজে, মোর চিত্ত মাঝে চিরনূতনের দিল ডাক, 25শে বৈশাখ হে নূতন দেখা দে কারবার, জন্মের প্রথম শুভক্ষণ। তোমার প্রকাশ কুহেলিকা করে উদ্ঘাটন, সূর্যের মতন। তোমার প্রকাশ কুহেলিকা করে উদ্ঘাটন, সূর্যের মতন। হে নূতন দেখা দে কারবার, জন্মের প্রথম শুভক্ষণ।
Before we recreate Tagore's last birthday, it would be interesting and illuminating to look into the background of this birthday. In 1937, on 10th September, Tagore had suddenly fainted due to what was subsequently diagnosed as an attack of erysipelas and had remained unconscious for over 60 hours. This was his first personal encounter with death. In the first 5 years of the 20th century, he was a witness to death of 5 immediate family members, which had led to his poems of Gitanjali. Now, he had visited the borderland between life and death and returned. Poems of Kranti are a testimony to this unique and rare experience. His health never returned to normalcy, and he was constantly suffering from one ailment or another. At the same time, in Africa, in Asia and Europe, Japan, Germany and Italy were playing havoc in the neighboring nations. In another 2 years, this was to culminate in a Holocaust of World War II, which broke out on September 1, 1939. As a prophet of peace and harbinger of harmony, as well as a sensitive poet committed to universal humanism, Tagore could not bear all this, which caused him mental agony and spiritual suffering as intense as his physical pain. On March 9, 1940, he returned to his friend Leonard Elmhirst.
As for the condition of my body, it is very similar to that of world politics today.
On September 24, 1940, he was suddenly taken ill at Kalimpong and was brought back to Kolkata. After a prolonged convalescence, he returned to Shantiniketan only in November. From now on, unable to move around freely, he was practically confined to his room like Amal, the protagonist of his immortal play Raghu. In spite of his physical pain and mental agony, his creative spirit was alert, alive and active. Volumes of poems, short stories, essays, all appeared one after another. And he painted also. Only the frequency of songs had decreased. In the last few months, he had started dictating as his fingers hurt. His sense of humor was intact. Since he was fed Glaxo milk powder, he called himself a Glaxo baby. His intake was as small as that of a few-month-old baby. Depending upon his intake, of the day, he would ask his attendants,
"And how many months old am I today?"
He constantly worried about the children of his school at Shantiniketan, whom we believed he had almost neglected. Little boys and girls visiting him were entertained by him with lozenges and chocolates. Even the dogs that came to his room and sat and slept under his chair were not excluded from his affection. All those who nursed him were constantly regaled by his sweet and pleasantries. During his last days, the temperature rose every evening and the nights were restless. He became so weak and frail that he had to be supported even to sit up. On July 25, 1941, he was brought to Calcutta against his will for a surgery. He missed the trees and the vast vista of Shanti. He dictated his last poem on the morning of July 30, a few hours before surgery. His condition worsened after the surgery, and gradually he lost consciousness. He passed away peacefully at midday on Shabani Purnima, August 7, 1941, in the same house where he was born 80 years ago on May 7, 1861. Today, on 7 May 2010, Tagore enters his 150th year. Once, while talking about the society at the time of his birth, he had said that the day on which he was born was not important. And yet, since 1900, when he was only 39, he has celebrated his birthday in many a song and poem. This justifies his own statement that there is not one Tagore, but there are many Tagores. He used to call these many Tagores as Nana Rabindranath, meaning a variety of Rabindranath. The 12 self-portraits he painted on his photograph appearing on the cover of Vishwabharati News confirms his claim. According to Bangla calendar, his birthday falls on the 25th day of Vaishak, and Bengalis call it Panchishe Vaishak. Unlike our calendar, the Bengali one does not distinguish between the lighter and the darker half of the lunar phase. In Shantiniketan, summer vacation had already started. By the time 25th day of Vaishak arrived, and hence traditionally Tagore's birthday was celebrated on the first day of Vaishak, which is also the new year for Bengalis. His birthday was also celebrated on 7th May and at some places even on 8th. Poila Vaishak, or the first day of Vaishak of 1348 by Bengali calendar, corresponds to April 14, 1941. It was on that day, that 80th birthday, the last birthday of Tagore, was celebrated in the evening in the veranda of Udayan, one of the Tagore residences in the Uttarayan complex of Shantiniketan. Reminiscing those days, Pratima Devi, daughter-in-law of Tagore, says,
Soon enough, it was the first day of Vaishak, beginning of the Bengali year 1348, a memorable year in history. On that day, the significance of this new year was not known to anyone. His last book of poems, Janmadine, was published on that day. In the morning, this book was presented to him. It was his final gift to the world and mankind on this auspicious birthday. These poems are fruits of his penance of pain and pinnacle of his offerings at the altar of life. On each page, the history of his final year is inscribed.
A few excerpts from the poems of Janmadine.
In my life, entwined with so many birthdays, I saw myself in the assemblage of various forms, watching the secret mystery of life behind the curtain of waves. I thought, even now, the veil of my life is not unfolded. The complete me, the entire me still remained hidden, invisible. On every new birthday, that line which is drawn by the strokes of the artist's brush fails to manifest the real identity. আরবার ফিরে এলো উৎসবের দিন, বসন্তের অজস্র সম্মান, ভরি দিল তরু শাখা কবির প্রাঙ্গণে নবজন্মদিনের ডালিতে। রুদ্ধ কক্ষে দূরে আছি আমি, এ বৎসরের বৃথা হলো পলাশ বনের নিমন্ত্রণ। Once again returns the day of festival with lavish honor of spring. The branches at the poet's balcony fill the basket of a new birthday. In a closed room I remain at a distance. Futile is the invitation of Polash forest. I want to sing a song in Basant Bahar, but the dream of the impending separation descends on the mind. As I proceed, unmerciful joy will play on this festive flute, brushing aside the pain of parting. When birthday and death day are face to face, I see in that meeting the hills of sunrise and sunset trading glances with this parting day, an exquisite end of a radiant dignity.
Facing death with dignity among the festivity of a birthday, it is a unique vision, magnificent in its magnanimity. A more poetic but detached view of death is rare even in world poetry. Fatima Devi writes further,
Planning for his final victory march, he had exhausted the limits of intense feelings. The deity of life who had presided in his heart since childhood had assimilated by now in the great experience of a supreme man. Who knew on that day that never again will there be another festival of birthday in his presence? But the arrangements for that day were beautiful. Many friends had sent many gifts for him. The room was filled with fruits and flowers, mainly the baskets of mangoes. Mangoes were his favorite. Even last year he used to have 6 to 7 mangoes a day. This year also, his devotees had sent mangoes from different places. But his appetite had dwindled. He would take only a spoonful when cajoled and coaxed.
Gandhiji sent him a telegram.
4 not enough. May you finish 5.
Tagore replied with his characteristic humor, Thanks, message, but 4 is impertinence, 5 intolerable.
Describing the events in the evening, Fatima Devi writes,
In the evening, his granddaughter dressed him in special attire for the birthday. White dhoti, a stole, and a garland of sandalwood. In a wheelchair he was taken to the veranda of Udayan, where arrangements were made for festivity. He was sick, but all the pain of the disease was consumed by the bright flame within. I wondered, which saint from the realm of meditation has appeared today to accept the worship of the new year? Girls from Shantiniketan and Sriniketan came with various gifts. The entire place was beautifully decorated with new creations. The artist had poured their heart out in greeting the 80th birthday. When the girls, attired in dress of spring, lined up before him with baskets, who knew that the baskets will never be presented to him again, or that this was his last birthday?
At 7 in the evening, the program started and lasted till 9. Tagore sat through the entire program. Moved by the affection expressed, Tagore said,
Dear inmates of ashram, today all of you have greeted me and given me gifts. In return, I send you my blessings and offer prayers for you. I have always blessed you implicitly. For a long time now, an uninterrupted shower of my blessings has been upon you. Today they appear before you in a new attire, and may you accept them appropriately. For all that we are born with, we have put in no efforts. There is no pride in the wealth of life we are blessed with. Subsequently, on the path of life, whatever we can accumulate, whatever treasure we can collect, that is a matter of wonder and pride. That intimacy is deep, natural and priceless, and that is what calls for blessings. Today, all that you have given to me with all your sincerity is like blessings of the providence, and believe me, it is an amazing event. My childhood was spent within the confining boundaries of a far-away family. I hardly knew anyone. My familiarity was limited to a few near and dear ones. Today, surrounded by all of you, I often wonder about the play of providence in my life. I could not have imagined this on that day. You cannot be called intimate as the word is used in common parlance, and hence your love and affection is priceless. The gifts offered by you in this festival of New Year, I accept them with sincere gratitude. Very few are as fortunate as I have been. Not only have I been loved by my countrymen, but many learned and creative persons from faraway lands have also showered their intimacy on me. I do not know what they have seen in my personality or performance. Today, I accept this love and affection and offer my salutation to the one who has made me deserve this glory.
Pulin Bihari Sen had taken down this message, and Pratima Devi has reproduced it in a book, Nirvan. Recollecting the message, Nirmal Kumari Bhagdanovich says,
Addressing all those who had greeted him, the poet spoke without a written script. I thought it was another person who was indisposed. There was no effort in his speech, no groping for words. He did not pause. He was not weary, nothing at all. I could hear him from far away. So loud and clear was his voice. He was so moved and spoke spontaneously. He spoke very well.
Tagore had written a message specially for this occasion called Crisis in Civilization. It was distributed as a pamphlet. In 1916, during World War I, he had delivered 3 lectures in Japan and America, which were subsequently published under the title of Nationalism. Those lectures anticipated this essay. In 1937, after his encounter with death, one of the poems he wrote after regaining normalcy on December 25,
"The day my consciousness was freed from the cave of extinction, it found itself in intolerable storm of surprise and extremely difficult times on the edge of some volcanic hellfire, its hot fumes roaring and spitting gross insult to man, the earth trembling with its evil din, smearing gloom in the air. I saw the self-destructive, foolish drunkenness of time, its all-pervasive, abominable sarcasm. On one side, a defiant cruelty, shameless roar of intoxication. On the other, diffident footsteps of cowardice, clasping the carefully hoarded treasures of a miser like a terrified animal, momentary barks followed by low-key screams and secure silent meekness. In conferences of the senior and mighty presidents, orders and decisions are crushed, suppressed and concealed between lips shut tight with doubt and diffidence. On the other hand, in the perturbed sky fly swarms of demon birds reaching the abode of the dead, the mechanical wings roaring like vultures hungry for human flesh desecrate the sky. O Judge, presiding on the throne of time, give me power, give me strength, give me the voice of thunder so that I may strike these obscene and repulsive killers of women and children with outrage and hatred, which may always pulsate in the heartthrob of this disgusting folklore, even when this choked, chained and scarred age is silently covered under the ashes of its own pyre."
On the very same day, he wrote another poem on the same subject.
All around, the serpent spread poisonous breath. Suave message of peace sounds like a futile wisecrack. Before departing, I give a call to all those who are preparing to battle with the demons.
Poet of peace that he was, he could not have ended on a note of outrage and hatred. Here, hence, there is subdued call to all those preparing to counter the venom being spread. These poems are a prelude to this address. The agony stored within for several years has been studied with the background of history, and the resultant analysis is presented in this address, which was delivered in 1941 when the World War was at its climax, and so was the crisis. It reflects his agony, personal and universal, mental and physical. It reveals his graceless disillusionment and grave disenchantment with Western civilization. It is a requiem to the decline and the fall of the Western civilization. It is his birthday message to the world and his own testament. And yet it ends with faith in man and hope for mankind. Because of his frail health and the length of the address, he was not allowed to read himself. Standing next to him, Khitimon Sen read it while he rested in a chair.
Today, I complete 80 years of my life. as I look back on the vast stretch of years that lie behind me and see in clear perspective the history of my early development, I am struck by the change that has taken place both in my own attitude and in the psychology of my countrymen. A change that carries within it a cause of profound tragedy. Our direct contact with the larger world of men was linked up with the contemporary history of the English people whom we came to know in those earlier days. It was mainly through their mighty literature that we formed our ideas with regard to these newcomers to our Indian shores. In those days, the type of learning that was served out to us was neither plentiful nor diverse, nor was the spirit of scientific enquiry very much in evidence. Thus, the scope being strictly limited, the educated of those days had recourse only to English language and literature. The days and nights were eloquent with the stately declamations of Burke, with Macaulay's long rolling sentences, discussions centered upon Shakespeare's drama and Byron's poetry, and above all upon the large-hearted liberalism of the 19th century English politics. At the time, though tentative attempts were being made to gain our national independence, at heart we had not lost faith in the generosity of the English race. This belief was so firmly rooted in the sentiments of our leaders as to lead them to hope that the victor would of his own grace pave the path of freedom for the vanquished. This belief was based upon the fact that England at the time provided a shelter to all those who had to flee from persecution in their own country. Political martyrs who had suffered for the honor of the people were accorded unreserved welcome at the hands of the English. I was impressed by this evidence of liberal humanity in the character of the English, and thus I was led to set them on the pedestal of my highest respect. This generosity in their national character had not yet been vitiated by imperialist pride. About this time, as a boy in England, I had the opportunity of listening to the speeches of John Bright, both in and outside the Parliament. The large-hearted radical liberalism of those speeches, overflowing all narrow national bounds, had made so deep an impression on my mind that something of it lingers even today, even in these days of graceless disillusionment. During my boyhood days, the attitude of the cultured and educated section of Bengal, nurtured on the English learning, was charged with a feeling of revolt against the rigid regulations of society. In place of the set codes of conduct, we accepted the ideal of civilization as represented by the English term. In our own family, this change of spirit was welcomed for the sake of its sheer rational and moral force, and its influence was felt in every sphere of our life. Born in that atmosphere, which was moreover colored by our intuitive bias for literature, I naturally set the English on the throne of my heart. Thus passed the first chapters of my life. Then came the parting of ways, accompanied with a painful feeling of disillusion, when I began increasingly to discover how easily those who accepted the highest truths of civilization disowned them with impunity whenever questions of national self-interest were involved. There came a time when perforce I had to snatch myself away from the mere appreciation of literature. As I emerged into the stark light of bare facts, the sight of dire poverty of the Indian masses rent my heart. Rudely shaken out of my dreams, I began to realize that perhaps in no other modern state was there such hopeless dearth of the most elementary need of existence. And yet, it was this country whose resources had fed for so long the wealth and magnificence of the British people. While I was lost in the contemplation of the great world of civilization, I could never have remotely imagined that the great ideas of humanity would end in such ruthless travesty. But today, a glaring example of it stares me in the face in the utter and contemptuous indifference of a so-called civilized race to the well-being of crores of Indian people. That mastery over the machine by which the British have consolidated their sovereignty over their vast empire has been kept a sealed book to which due access has been denied to this helpless country. And all the time before our very eyes, Japan has been transforming herself into a mighty and prosperous nation. I have seen with my own eyes the admirable use to which Japan has put in her own country the fruits of this progress. I have also been privileged to witness, while in Moscow, the unsparing energy with which Russia has tried to fight disease and illiteracy and has succeeded in steadily liquidating ignorance and poverty, wiping off the humiliation from the face of a vast continent. Her civilization is free from all invidious distinction between one class and another, between one sect and another. The rapid and astounding progress achieved by her made me happy and jealous at the same time. One aspect of the Soviet administration which particularly pleased me was that it provided no scope for unseemly conflict of religious differences, nor set one community against another by unbalanced distribution of political favors. That I consider a truly civilized administration which impartially serves the common interests of the people. When I see elsewhere some 200 nationalities which only a few years ago were at vastly different stages of development, marching ahead in peaceful progress and amity, and when I look about in my own country and see a very highly evolved people drifting into the disorder of barbarism, I cannot help contrasting the two systems of governments, one based on cooperation, the other on exploitation, which have made such contrary conditions possible. Thus, while these other countries were marching ahead, India, smothered under the dead weight of British administration, lay static in her utter helplessness. Such is the tragic tale of the gradual loss of my faith in the claims of the European nations to civilization.
With apologies to Tagore, and even at the cost of interrupting this great address, I would like to draw your attention to certain important aspects. Here it is Tagore, the poet, who presents his own worldview through his astute vision of not only the Indian history, but also the world history. The result is a poetic essay of historical importance, which reveals his deep knowledge of and profound insight into the workings of man's destiny. Let us get back to the address.
In India, the misfortune of being governed by a foreign race is daily brought home to us, not only in the callous neglect of such minimum necessities of life as adequate provision for food, clothing, education and medical facilities for the people, but in an even unhappier form in the way people have divided themselves. The pity of it is that the blame is laid at the door of our own society. So frightful a culmination of the history of our people would never have been possible but for the encouragement it has received from secret influences emanating from high places. One cannot believe that Indians are in any way inferior to the Japanese in intellectual capacity. The most effective difference between these two Eastern peoples is that whereas India lies at the mercy of the British, Japan has been spared the shadow of alien domination. We know what we have been deprived of. That which was truly best in their own civilizations, namely the upholding of the dignity of human relationships, has no place in the British administration of this country. If in its place they have established, with baton in hand, a reign of law and order, in other words, a policeman's rule, such mockery of civilization can claim no respect from us. It is the mission of civilization to bring unity among people and establish peace and harmony. But in unfortunate India, the social fabric is being rent to shreds by unseemly outbursts of hooliganism daily growing in intensity right under the very aegis of law and order. In India, so long as no personal injury is inflicted upon any member of the ruling race, this barbarism seems to be assured of perpetuity, making us ashamed to live under such an administration. My good fortune has brought me into close contact with really large-hearted Englishmen. Without the slightest hesitation, I may say that the nobility of their character was without parallel. In no country or community have I come across such greatness of soul. Such examples would not allow me to wholly lose faith in the race which produced them. I had the rare blessing of having Andrews, a real Englishman, a real Christian, and a true man, for a very close friend. Today, in the perspective of death, his unselfish and courageous magnanimity shines all the brighter. The whole of India remains indebted to him for innumerable acts of love and devotion. But personally speaking, I am especially beholden to him because he helped me to retain in my old age that feeling of respect for the English race with which in the past I was inspired by the literature and which I was about to lose completely. I count such Englishmen as Andrews not only as my personal and intimate friends, but as friends of the whole human race. To have known them has been to me a treasured privilege. It is my belief that such Englishmen will save British honour from shipwreck. At any rate, if I had not known them, my despair at the prospect of Western civilization would be unrelieved.
Once again, I seek your indulgence and your pardon for my interruption. You may recall that Gandhiji often said that it was a wrong that had to be frowned upon and not the wrongdoer. Similarly, Tagore criticizes not the English, but the English administration in India. Such fine distinction can be made by only great minds, which are poetic and visionary at the same time. Back to the address.
In the meanwhile, the demon of barbarity has given up all pretense and has emerged with unconcealed fangs, ready to tear up humanity in an orgy of devastation. From one end of the world to the other, the poisonous fumes of hatred darken the atmosphere. The spirit of violence, which perhaps lay dormant in the psychology of the West, has at last roused itself and desecrates the spirit of man. The wheels of fate will someday compel the English to give up their Indian empire. But what kind of India will they leave behind? What stark misery when the stream of the centuries' administration runs dry at last? What a waste of mud and filth they will leave behind them. I had at one time believed that the springs of civilization would issue out of the heart of Europe. But today, when I am about to quit the world, that faith has gone bankrupt altogether. As I look around, I see the crumbling ruins of a proud civilization strewn around like a vast heap of futility. And yet, I shall not commit the grievous sin of losing faith in man. I would rather look forward to the opening of a new chapter in his history after the cataclysm is over and the atmosphere rendered clean with the spirit of service and sacrifice. Perhaps the dawn will come from this horizon, from the east where the sun rises. A day will come when unvanquished man will retrace his path of conquest, despite all barriers, to win back his lost human heritage. Today, we witness the perils which attend on the insolence of might. One day shall be borne out the full truth of what the sages had proclaimed. Adharmena aidhate tavat tato bhadrani pashyati tatah sapatnat jayati samulastu vinashyati. By unrighteousness, man prospers, gains what appears desirable, conquers enemies, but he perishes at the root.
Expressing his anguish and not anger for barbarism and brutality of Nazism and fascism, Tagore ends with his full and final faith in man and his hope for mankind. He heralds the coming of a supreme man and the opening of a new chapter in the history of man. Unfortunately, he did not live to welcome the new man, nor to read the new chapter, but left behind a message of pragmatic optimism in his magnum opus. A few days after the address was delivered, Tagore had told Nirmal Kumari,
"You saw what I could do. I could have read Crisis in Civilization. Although Kitty Babu is not a bad orator, but no one allowed me to read. When I have written it, is it not proper that I read it? Because I was not allowed, I deliberately spoke extempore."
A few days ago, he was approached by his grandnephew Saumendranath with a request to write a song in praise of man that could be sung in chorus. Tagore wrote a long song, and while composing notes for the same, he shortened it. The song presents the same sentiments as those expressed at the end of civilization, and hence it was sung after the address was read.
The supreme man arrives. The sky from one end to the other is astir with expectation and awe, and so is every blade of grass in the dust of the earth. In heaven sounds the conch, On the earth the drums of victory. The moment of the great birth has arrived. Today the forts of the moonless night have fallen to dust. From the peak of the sunrise rises the chant of fear not, the promise of a new life. The vast sky reverberates with the victory song of the advent of man. The supreme man arrives.
A few days later, Shantidev Ghosh, the master musician of Rabindra Sangeet at Shantiniketan, requested Tagore to write a new song for his birthday on 25th Vaishak. Initially, he declined, claiming that the song that he wrote for Sauminana was indeed a birthday song. On further pleading, he changed a few lines of his earlier poem, Ponchishe Vaishak, from Purabi and set it to music on 23rd of Vaishak or May 5, 1941. This was his last song, Hey Nutan, in which he sings of ever new and ever changing.
O avenue, time and again appears the first auspicious moment of birth. O avenue, time and again appears the first auspicious moment of birth. Like sun, your light tears through the mist, piercing the core of oblivion. Please unveil yourself. Expressing the joy of life, let the perpetual wonder of the infinite be expressed within you. The conch blows in the east, and in my heart, the avenue beckons. 25th of Vaishak. O avenue, time and again appears the final auspicious moment of birth. O ever new.
On the very next day, on May 6, Tagore wrote his last birthday poem, in which his message to the inmates of ashram was expressed in a poetic and universal version. Perhaps he had premonition of his end. Perhaps he knew that this was his last birthday. Only a great optimistic humanitarian could have been so tender and so affectionate amidst unbearable mental agony and physical pain. Let us end this homage on 149th birthday of that world poet by repeating his own swan song rendered on the eve of his last birthday.
On my own birthday, I am lost. I would like my comrades around, a mere touch of their hands, carrying the ultimate offerings of life. I will leave the last drops of love of the earth and the final blessings of mankind. Giving away all that I had to offer, my sack is empty today. If I can get something in return, some affection, some remission, I would like to take it with me when I cross over in the boat for the wordless final festival.